Today's lecture is supported by the Crawford Inn and May Selstrom Barger Lectureship in Business and Economics and by the Robert S. Barger Memorial Lectureship. Many generations of the Barger family have been involved at Chautauqua. Crawford helped raise funds for the institution in the 30s, and his wife May was a pianist who played at the Amphitheater. Robert served as both institution and foundation trustee. So please join me in thanking the Barger family as we thank all your families for support of Chautauqua. With us this morning is Michael Ruhlman, award-winning author of more than 20 books. After a brief stint as a copy boy at the New York Times, Mr. Ruhlman asked the Culinary Institute of America to visit kitchen classrooms in order to write a narrative of how schools train professional chefs. The resulting book, The Making of a Chef, was not his first published book, but it was his first food book, and we are thrilled that this work started Mr. Ruhlman on a path of food writing that brought him to Chautauqua. In addition to many other titles, Mr. Ruhlman is the co-author of Charcuterie, The Craft of Salting, Smoking, and Curing, and the author of Ruhlman's 20, The Ideas and Techniques That Will Make You a Better Cook, which won a James Beard Foundation Award and the International Association of Culinary Professionals Cookbook Award. His most recent book, Grocery, The Buying and Selling of Food in America, has also been received with critical acclaim. Among many TV appearances, Mr. Ruhlman has been a judge on the PBS reality show Cooking Under Fire and on The Next Iron Chef. He's also made several appearances in Anthony Bourdain's shows, including No Reservations. Mr. Ruhlman is a graduate of Duke University, and this is his second appearance on the Chautauqua platform. Ann Patchett will lead the conversation this morning. Ms. Patchett is the author of 10 books, including her memoir, This is the Story of a Happy Marriage. Ms. Patchett has received England's Orange Prize, the PEN/Faulkner Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and the Women's National Book Association's Award. Her work has been translated into more than 30 languages, and she was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Of course, most importantly to us here, her newest novel, Commonwealth, is a selection of the Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle, and she will discuss it on Thursday afternoon. Ann is a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College, received her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop at the University of Iowa. This is also her second trip to Chautauqua. So, ladies and gentlemen, cooks, writers, television personalities, and grocery shoppers, please welcome Michael Ruhlman and Ann Patchett.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you.
I am so honored to be here with you.
We have been in the back trying really hard not to have a conversation because we kept talking about food and then saying, wait, no, we have to stop. And almost any one thing that I want to talk to you about, I could feel like we could talk for 8 hours without stopping because food is just the centerpiece of so much of the national dialogue.
We take it for granted, though. We've taken it for granted for so long. This is why it's so important to talk about now. We took it for granted because we took food for granted. I don't know, how is that? Is that better? All right, shout again if you can't hear me. What Ann said, I was remarking that we took food for granted for so long, and it started making us sick and confused, and thus we do need to talk about it, and we need to talk sensibly about it. And I thought it began in a grocery store, which is where our food comes from.
Okay, so let's just start with, it comes from a grocery store. Who knew? I grew up on a farm. I grew up in Tennessee in the country, and the grocery store was not always where food came from. But one of the things that I love so much about your book, which all of you buy a copy, read this book. It's a very, very good book. is that you bring so much joy to it. And you love the grocery store. You love going grocery shopping. You love cooking. I know you recently married somebody who is terrific, who I've known for a long time. And as I was reading this book, I kept thinking Ann Hood is the luckiest woman on the planet to find a husband who likes to grocery shop and cook. So, seriously. But I wish my husband was here just so he could see what was possible. So let's start there. Tell me why you love grocery stores, and tell me how you decided to pick the particular grocery store you focused on in this book.
I have been on sort of a crusade. I've been writing about food and cooking for a long time, but only over the past 10 years has it dawned on me how important cooking is. It is much more than just feeding our bodies. It's feeding our families. It's feeding our communities. It brings us together. And we give up cooking. We've largely given up cooking in big ways at our own peril. And so in order to encourage people to cook more, how important cooking was, I had to know where this food in my grocery store was coming from. That is, if you don't, unless you live on a farm as you did, that's where we get most of our food. Also, I love to eat. And far from being a chore, grocery shopping to me was a pleasure. And as I wrote more and more about grocery stores, I realized what an incredible institution they are. We can get all manner of food for relatively little money any day of the week, pretty much anywhere we are, throughout the whole country. I was wondering, how can I get pea pods in Cleveland in March, any day of March, as much as I want? Where's it all coming from? And not just in Cleveland, this is happening all over the country. Where is all this food coming from? And what does it mean? So I wanted to look at the grocery store, this marvel of civilization, our collective food supply, our community pantry, where we share our food. It's our walls of Jericho. The walls of Jericho originally were built to protect our grain. So the grocery store is this modern marvel that we don't think about, or if we do, we think about it as being a chore. We want to avoid it, get in and get out. But I want people to appreciate grocery stores as the marvel that they are. I chose a small chain in Cleveland called Heinen's, run by two. Yes.
I love that.
Me too. Lots of Clevelanders at Chautauqua. I know. It's like a for those of you who don't know, it's very much like a Wegmans high-end grocery store. Also a great grocery store. I love people who are applauding grocery stores.
I know, it's true, but it speaks exactly to your point. Exactly. We're passionate about it.
These people who clap for Wegmans and Heinen's appreciate the quality of food that they make available to us.
How many Heinen's are there?
There are now 22 Heinen's. They've moved into Chicago, but they're primarily based in Cleveland. There are, I believe, nearly 100 Wegmans, which is astonishing for a family-run business. So the Heinen's were big enough that I could get a sense of the business. They do $600 million in sales every year. And they're still considered a small family business because they run on a 1% margin. So if you ask a business executive, say, you invest in this company that does $500 million in sales every year, but only makes $5 million in profit, would you invest in that? No, you'd be crazy to invest in that. And yet that's how grocery stores operate. They were also willing to let me in. I'm from Cleveland. My father, who I lost shortly before my last appearance on this stage, loved grocery stores. And I think part of my desire for grocery stores was to connect with my father. That was also a very personal story. I loved my father. He loved grocery shopping. They were a wonder to him. And he would go to 5 in a day. And so it's a way to reconnect with my father well. So it's a personal story. It's a business story. It's about where our food comes from, what's good for us and what's bad for us, and our food confusion.
So just to stick with your father for 1 second, did you take your kids to the grocery store when they were small? Did you instill this love of groceries in your own children?
I did whenever I could, absolutely, and talked about food. It was a way to talk with my kids about food. I loved going to the grocery store. In fact, I was talking with Andre Dubus, the wonderful fiction writer and memoirist.
I love him. He was such a nice guy.
Such a lovely man.
Yeah.
He grew up in poverty, basically.
Right.
His father was Andre Dubus, the great fiction and short story writer, and they divorced. His mother was raising 3 kids on very little money, and they didn't have any food in the fridge. They didn't starve. It was he calls it first world poverty. But he knew what it was like not to have food. And so when he goes to a grocery store, he loves to bring his kids. Partly it's because he can now feed his family. Successful writer and teacher. He loves this. It's thanking his mom, basically, who allowed him to become, because through her work, allowed him to become the writer that he is. He can now feed his family anything they want. So he has that great appreciation of what it means, what a grocery store means, and he loved to go to the grocery store. So the grocery store has that kind of power for me.
Okay, so where do we even start? First, I'm interested, does a big chain like Kroger's or Whole Foods, do they operate on a 1% margin as well?
Yes, they do. Everyone does. No one's figured out how to do it cheaper. In fact, the margins are going down. That's why you're losing family change, is because in order to make money on those slim margins, you have to increase volume. So that's why.
So we're increasing volume. Let's talk about Amazon.
For a long time, grocers were worried about Amazon. Now they're really worried about Amazon.
That's funny. It happened in the book business, too.
It happened in the book business, too.
Hey, Shara, does that fall under the heading of inflammatory things we're not supposed to say on stage?
Well, one of the things Amazon did do is it encouraged people to pay attention to their independent booksellers, and I think allowed some booksellers to flourish when they might not have with Borders and Barnes & Noble.
Yes.
So maybe the Amazon deal will increase the quality of food for those who care about the best food that they can buy.
Well, tell us what, you guys know about this, right? Amazon's bought Whole Foods. So what is this going to do to Whole Foods, and how do you see it rippling out to other groceries in the future?
No one quite knows what's going to happen. Amazon had been dabbling in the food business and the business of distributing food for a while.
Do they own Blue Apron? Is that what they own?
Amazon?
Yeah.
I don't know if they don't own Blue Apron yet.
Yet. And Our Souls, do they own them?
They're working on it. They are working on it. What it means is that Amazon is now in the grocery business full force. It means that grocers, they knew they're going to have to get better at what they're doing as far as cost of goods and delivery of those goods. Now, what they thought they had 3 years to do, now they have 18 months to do it. Amazon now has 431 brick and mortar stores. They now have a supply chain. They bought Whole Foods supply chain. Whole Foods developed an extraordinary supply chain of great food. Whole Foods, and I want people to appreciate this, started by John Mackey, probably did more to change the food that is available to us than any other person, at least this part of the century, in 100 years. He made it possible for grocers to sell organic food. Before Whole Foods, Heinen's said, we'd love to sell organic food. We couldn't get enough of it. There weren't enough people growing it. Whole Foods came in and showed that farmers could make a living growing organic food. So they changed organic food. They had made it available to grocers. Before Whole Foods, Heinen's wouldn't have been able to sell antibiotic and hormone-free beef. Because of Whole Foods, now they can. Now, all grocers can offer the same quality food Whole Foods does, but for less money, which is why Whole Foods was in such financial trouble that they had to sell.
I don't understand that. Why is it more expensive? Why does it cost more for Whole Foods to sell it than Heinen's?
It shouldn't cost them more, but given their business model, they have a higher margins that they demand, and in order to do that, they've had to set. They used to be able to sell it for higher prices when no one else offered it. Now they've kept those prices the same because that's how their business succeeded. Only grocers are undercutting them. So the only thing that's now distinguishing Whole Foods from your traditional Wegmans or Heinen's is a higher food cost, which is not a great thing to differentiate yourself with. Which is why they were in trouble, which is why this Amazon deal was a savior for Whole Foods.
So you think Whole Foods feels good about this?
I think shareholders in Whole Foods feel good about this.
Okay.
What Amazon will do now that they have 431 stores, they can use those stores as stores, or they could use them as distribution centers. They can use them as food production services.
Explain that. I don't understand that.
Well, grocery stores, as they evolved, grocery stores are a fascinating thing. They combine two business models. They have both a mercantile model. They get stuff in, they merchandise it, and send it out. And they have a manufacturing model. They get product in, transform that product, and sell it as something different. They are basically turning into restaurants / food purveyors. So they're becoming restaurants. Prepared foods are now a big deal. More and more people are getting into prepared foods. Whole Foods is big into prepared foods. And so now Amazon has basically a food production centers throughout the country, and distribution centers throughout the country, as well as stores. And how they use that is going to very likely change the nature of how we get our food and the kind of food that's available to us. I predict at the center of the store, all the stuff that won't go bad, all the non-perishable foods we will get by mail, and that will empty out, and grocers will go back to being the purveyors of fine specialty goods, great cheeses, great meats, great fish. All those great perishable goods will then be sold by grocers, and we'll get our Coca-Colas and our cornflakes and our cat food delivered to us by UPS.
Okay, so my Whole Foods in Nashville, Tennessee, do you mean that they will be taking orders and sending box of cereal out in the mail? Because as somebody, I own a bookstore and we mail books out. So the whole arrangement of the back room of the store has to significantly change. Or is it that Amazon will have all of those boxes of cereal wherever they have books and widgets and whatever Amazon sells, and they'll send the cereal out from there?
Well, they've been doing that for a while now.
Okay.
So they have been doing that, and they do that, but they can now get into sending all manner of food, whether it's the home meal delivery like Blue Apron, or prepared foods, or the commodity foods that is the same everywhere.
Is getting your cat food and Coca-Cola in the mail, is that something that rich people are going to do? It doesn't seem that this is really applicable to everyone. Ordering your groceries online seems like a very first world activity.
Right now it is. Hopefully, or my hope would be that it would serve those people who live in a food desert. It would be a great boon to them.
Okay.
So I'm hoping we can make it available to those who most need their food to be good.
Let's talk about a food desert. I had old cousins who lived in Topeka, Kansas. I imagine there's not going to be a shout out for Topeka. To say there was not a grocery store. There was a Quick Trip with a gas station, and they could get milk and orange juice and maybe Campbell's soup. But their diet was radically affected by the fact that the only produce that they could have access to was a banana. That's a food desert.
That's a food desert. About 23 million Americans live in such a food desert, and it has been shown that those who do live in food deserts are more likely to be sick, more likely to have food-related illnesses, and are more likely to die younger.
And they're also paying a significantly larger portion of their income to food, because that's the most expensive food you can buy.
That is also correct. It's a problem, and it could be theoretically solved by Amazon's delivery distribution system.
Do you ever get freaked out about the shipping? That's something that really, really bothers me. When I think about, I got Blue Apron. My sister lives in a tiny town in East Tennessee. And they have a grocery store, but they don't have basil, that sort of thing. So she got really into Blue Apron, and it's wonderful for her. And she said, "This has changed my life. I want to send you Blue Apron." I got it 1 week, and I just about had a heart attack, because the stuff that you have to throw away. You can recycle, but some of it, but most of it you're just pouring down in those freezer packs, and it's terrifying to me to think that everybody is going to start having everything shipped. Is that the next book, or is that just like on the list of things I should be worried about at the end of the earth? That's probably not so high up there.
Common sense would say, yeah, be worried about it. That's a lot of packing material and stuff. I too felt the same way when I got this stuff. And little plastic containers with 1 jalapeno pepper in it.
Exactly.
My hope is that people will try this once, realize how easy it is to cook, and how easy it is to go out and buy these few ingredients and put it together, that they'll sort of put themselves out of business, and we won't need that. But
people aren't cooking. Do you want to talk about that?
I wish people were cooking more, but they don't seem to be. I interviewed a guy named Harry Balzer who's been studying this for years. He says people are cooking. He says, very cynical guy, says people are stupid and they're lazy and they're not going to cook, and it's going to be like that forever. Our main work is going to be who's going to do the cooking, and the main answer is going to be not me. That's a dangerous thing, I think. I think that cooking, as we talked about earlier in the green room, there's an argument that cooking made us human. It was the actual activity that allowed us to triumph over our upright hominid ancestors. It gave us enormous amounts of calorie. It brought us together. It facilitated language. It facilitated cooperation, which allowed us to form communities, and this allowed us to succeed. We stopped cooking in the 1950s and 60s, and we've gotten sick. And I think that we need to go back to cooking our food. We need to realize that cooking our food does more than nourish our bodies.
Okay, but how do we do that? Because you would think that the advent of the Food Network and the fact that people watch cooking shows all the time would make people more interested in cooking, and it's not.
I think they're doing that instead of cooking. It's subliminal cooking. They recognize there's something missing in their lives, and they're scratching this ghost dish on an amputated limb.
Are you serious?
I think so. We have to recognize that cooking does take time. You do have to share in the work of cooking. But we need to recognize that it's important. People say, I don't have time to cook. You don't hear them say, I don't have time to shower. You don't say, God, I love showering, I just don't have the time. It's about allocating our time. It's about recognizing that when we cook our own food, our bodies are healthier, our families are healthier, our communities are healthier, and our environment is healthier.
I feel like cooking is like religion.
Cooking is a political act. It's a political act saying, this is important. Here's what I value. I value good food that's good for the environment. I value my family, and I value my body. And that's what cooking is.
But I feel like if people don't grow up in a household where there is cooking, in the same way if you don't grow up in a household where there's religion, it's just not something you're going to pick up on your own when you're 30.
It's difficult too. You're absolutely right. We have a whole generation that grew up not knowing how to cook. So our kids don't know how to cook anymore. So we're trying to relearn something that shouldn't have gone away in the first place. But part of it is learning how to cook.
So there's this great piece that I read when Obama was in office for about the first year, and it was an article by Amanda Hess, who also is a terrific food writer, and she was criticizing Michelle Obama's, can you remember the day when we could sit around and criticize Michelle Obama? But I'm not saying anything. Because she was never naked in magazines. Okay, so that doesn't matter, though. But Amanda Hess was saying that Michelle Obama was promoting gardening and organic gardening and teaching kids how to grow a garden and get vegetables out of the ground, but that Michelle Obama didn't have any interest in cooking, which apparently she really didn't. And Amanda Hess said that teaching people to grow their own food without teaching them how to cook it was like promoting having babies without raising them, which I thought was a great line. And Michelle Obama said the very best thing about being First Lady was the fact that she had somebody to cook and she didn't have to cook anymore because cooking drove her crazy. So how do we get kids to cook? I took home ec. I am 53. Home ec! Yay! Catholic education. I learned how to make a crepe, and I learned how to put a zipper in a dress. So, is there any way, I mean, I want to say we've got to get home ec back in schools, but then we also need to get music back and art back and all of these things that we've lost. Yeah. So, how do we get young people and old people and everybody else in between engaged in cooking?
First, to make sure they know how important it is. Second, how easy it is. Third, what an astonishing array of food we have available to us now. We've never had better food in the history of America available to so many people. It's only gotten better, and it's going to keep getting better as long as we make good food choices and buy the good food. Because remember that when you buy crappy food, they're going to replace it. When you buy really good food, they're going to replace it. They are not going to make a judgment call on what you eat. They want to give you what you want. If you want those Pringles potato chips, they're going to give you more of them. If you want the good fresh fish that's sustainably caught, they're going to give you more of it. So recognizing that our choices as consumers does more than anything else to determine the food that's available to us. And then to recognize that cooking's not that hard.
It is.
Stop it! How hard is it to make an egg and some toast?
Yeah, an egg and toast, that's not cooking. I make dinner every single night, and it grinds my soul to dust.
You need to invite me. Oh, dear.
I mean, I do it because it's good for me and my husband, and it's important, and I believe every single thing you're saying, except the part where you say, it's easy,
It can be hard if you make it hard. It can be easy if you make it. I wrote a book. I was sitting with an editor at the Greenbrier Food Writers Symposium. I said, Bill, he's saying the same thing. I said, Bill, there's only 20 things you need to cook in order to cook anything. And he looked at me and said, that's a book.
That is a book.
So I wrote a book, 20 techniques, 100 recipes, a cook's manifesto, basically showing how easy food and cooking is. It takes planning. That's the hardest part, is just planning ahead of time, having the food available to you, knowing what to eat. And what to eat now is what I tell people, eat stuff that will go bad. If you're buying a lot of stuff that can sit on your shelf for weeks and weeks and weeks, you don't want to put it in your body.
Okay, I eat stuff that would go bad, but it's like I'm French. I'm going to the grocery store every day.
That's how we have good food. Now,
but I'd also like to write a novel, and I mean, it really takes a lot of my life, and then we eat it in 7 minutes. I don't know. I want you to tell me what the answer is. It's not like I'm going to start eating country inn broccoli cheddar rice. You know, I'm not going to do that. I know I have to use all of the fresh, delicious, wholesome, exhausting food.
You're not making it easy up here.
I'm sorry. Okay, all right.
It is very easy to make a tomato sauce with fresh tomatoes. You blend them and you cook them with some onion and some butter, and then you have a beautiful tomato sauce. Make a double batch and add some beef to that if you eat meat, and you've got a beautiful beef stew. Put it over some fresh pasta and have a salad, and that's a lovely meal. It shouldn't take you more than a half an hour.
You put tomato sauce on your salad?
No, I serve it along with the pasta.
I'm sorry.
I've never tried that.
I wasn't tracking at all.
We put kale in tomato sauce. That would work.
Okay.
Could do that.
All right. Okay, so what's going to happen, back to grocery stores, what's going to happen to our grocery store when the middle is gone and we only have the parameter? I was talking, it was the end of my reporting, I was talking with Jeff Heinen about what the grocery store was going to look like in 10 years. And he turned around and looked at the whole vast 30,000 feet of grocery. It's the department called grocery. It's all the stuff that won't go bad. I said, all this stuff is commodity. It's the same whether you buy it at Heinen's or whether you get it from Amazon or a Kroger or at a drugstore. And we can now get food at drugstores. When we were growing up, you couldn't get food at drugstores. Our food retail system is fragmenting. It's important to realize that as well. We can get, you can go and buy a quart of milk at a drugstore now. We didn't used to be able to do that.
all that center stuff is going to go away. It's going to be delivered to your house through the mail, through UPS, through the post office. And grocers may very well come back to the original days where they were a purveyor of specialty goods that no one else could get. Those Heinens are going to get you the best meat, the best dairy, the best cheeses, the best wines, and they're going to go back to being purveyors of specialty goods. And the Amazons of the world are going to be delivering our commodity foods. And I think we're going to eat less and less of those commodity foods because of it. And we're going to appreciate the fine foods that we have, and we're going to demand more of it. I know I'm eternally optimistic, despite people like you.
No, I am eternally optimistic. I mean, and I do actually believe if you keep saying something, it will happen. Build it and they will come. Are we going to have milkmen again?
Well, it's not. I don't think so. It's going to be delivered by Amazon now.
But can you deliver milk by Amazon? That's gross.
If you order it, they will send it to you. If it's
Oh, take a moment to get the visual on that box in August, opening up the milk.
Yeah. I don't know. You may have services that will deliver fresh milk from farmers in your region. We are developing all kinds of distribution chains for those people who are willing to pay for it and want those quality goods. So there are all kinds of models that, like Fresh Direct, is a huge hit in New York because it will deliver fresh produce right to your door in a city that's very hard and inconvenient to lug home groceries because we don't have cars. You don't want to take groceries home in taxis. So we are developing now huge distribution systems to deliver our food to us.
One thing that has really changed grocery stores in Nashville, where I live, is just in the past 6 months, we can sell wine.
Really?
Which we have never been able to do. We could sell beer, and this is because a former governor of the great state of Tennessee had a beer distributorship. And so he convinced the legislature that good Christian folk would not want to buy bananas in the same place that sold wine. So you could only sell beer in the grocery store because that's how he made his living. And now we have wine. Selling alcohol in a grocery store makes a huge difference to the bottom line of a grocery store.
It does, and it makes a huge difference to the quality of wine that you can get for a good price, because grocery stores have great purchasing power, and if they have good food purchasers, they can find those great deals, and you get really good bottles of wine for very little cost. Heinen's now has cruvinettes, so you can get a glass of wine and drink while you shop.
No.
Yeah.
No.
They even have cup holders now in their shopping carts.
This is really one of those moments that I'm like, oh, I am from Tennessee. I'm like, I cannot believe that.
Come to Cleveland.
Do they sell hard liquor in the grocery store?
In Chicago they do, but in Cleveland they don't. All rules are funny. In New York they don't sell wine in grocery stores. These blue laws and the laws governing where and how alcohol can be sold varies from state to state.
Okay, let's talk about the thing that I would like to talk about for 6 days. Let's talk about health and food. And I am really struggling to get my mind around this because you say in your book that food cannot be healthy.
True. Food is not healthy. Kale is not healthy.
I
often get cheers from men when they hear that kale is not healthy. Kale's been foisted on them by earnest wives.
Okay, so I grew up in the women's magazine industry. That's how I made my living for a long time. And my husband is an internist. And I say, because it is true, I know more about food, health, and nutrition writing for women's magazines in my 20s and 30s that he ever learned in medical school. But I am somebody who, if I read an article that says there's arsenic in rice, I think, well, okay, rice, that's off the list. I am constantly cutting things out of my diet because I believe that it's going to kill me.
You are part of a growing number of people who are
with mentally disabled. No, I realize it's really a problem.
It is a disability. It's telling that she knew more than her physician husband about how we've thought about nutrition for so long. They don't teach you nutrition in med school. They don't learn about nutrition in med school.
They teach
Imagine
it
that.
to you in Catholic girls' school. No, they do.
They knew it was important.
Yeah. So talk about this. I am so puzzled. When I go to the grocery store, I am looking for healthy food, and I'm looking for the food that's going to keep my husband alive forever because I love him.
Our food is not healthy. Our food is nutritious. We are healthy. We are healthy if we eat nutritious food. So stop thinking of your
So
food as
this is
nutritious.
just a grammatical mistake on my part?
Words are where understanding starts.
Okay.
Again, I will use the example of a steak dinner. A steak's got a nice crust of delicious salt on it and a slather of butter, and it's served with a baked potato with a big heaping of sour cream and some green beans. And I ask somebody, is that healthy? And they are confused. Well, some of it's healthy, but there's salt on the meat, and we're told not to eat too much red meat, and there's fatty sour cream on the potato. So I don't know. I said, is that meal nutritious? That's obvious. Yes, it's nutritious. It's loaded with nutrients. So if we think about our food as being nutritious, if we pick up a box of food and say, is this nutritious? Are these Pringles nutritious? No, they're not nutritious. That's where our thinking starts. We need to think differently about food. And then we have to know where to shop in the food. And I say eat food that goes bad. Food that goes bad is the stuff that's good for us. Food that won't go bad is more likely to be bad for us. What do we do with all this flood of articles telling us what to eat and how to eat? Don't listen to them. Don't listen to anybody about food. Don't listen to me about food. Listen to yourself.
Well, wait, if we don't listen to you about food, then we're going to just be eating box crackers and Pringles.
Okay, listen to me then.
Listen to him. He's very smart.
Here's a story. I was standing in a grocery store line. I write about this in the book. And I was standing behind a well-dressed lady. It was in the evening. I assumed she was coming home from work and picking up a basket full of groceries. She put a carton of fat-free half and half on the conveyor belt. And I stared at it, and I looked at her, and I stared at it, and I thought about saying nothing, but I couldn't. I couldn't help it. Half and half is defined by the quantity of fat that's in it. So I asked her, ma'am, why are you buying this fat-free half and half? And she looked at me startled to be questioned on her food choices, and she looked at me and said, because it's fat-free? And I said, what do you think they're replacing the fat with? And she picked it up, read the ingredients, and read them out loud. Skim milk, corn syrup. First two ingredients. She said, put it down and bought the fat-free half and half anyway. So this industry has replaced something that's good, we know now to be good for us, which is dairy fat in proper amounts. It's good for us, and replaced it with something we know to be bad for us, which is sugar, corn syrup. And so pervasive is this fat is bad, that it's very hard for us to avoid that, grabbing for that fat-free thing. So we need to understand that fat is not bad, stupid is bad. We need to pay attention.
Okay, but you're saying two things at the same time, because you're saying, well, we used to think fat was bad, but now we know fat's bad, not bad. We know that sugar's bad. But who's to say that 5 years from now we're not going to find out that sugar is fantastic and coconut oil is bad again? That the eggs were so bad and now they're so good. I'm very confused.
As you should be. We have been given bad information for decades. Remember when eggs were bad for us? We were taught that eggs were bad for us. This miracle of nutrition, economy, deliciousness, functionality in the kitchen were bad for us. Go out and eat eggs as you wish.
So how much of what we know is good and bad comes from government subsidies in farming?
The lobbies in Washington are very powerful. And the sugar industry, as we now know, was hugely influential in making the fat is bad and steering researchers away from looking at sugar. So it's very bad. We have to be skeptical of everything.
Okay. The thing that just upsets me, freaks me out so badly as a vegetarian, I don't know if they have these up here, but in the South, they have these giant billboards and there are cows, like the cows are sculpted three-dimensional and they're standing on each other's shoulders with paintbrushes. You know what I'm talking about? And it says "eat more chicken" and it's misspelled because it's the Chick-fil-A. The whole idea that what the cows are saying is, don't slaughter us, slaughter the chickens. And I sort of feel like that's what the fat and the sugar people are doing. Don't kill my industry, kill their industry.
Well, there's no fat lobby out there. There's no fat industry out there. We've spent.
Well, but there's a dairy industry. I mean, and there's a beef industry. If that's not the fat lobby, I don't know what is.
That's true. But, we've been taking so much fat out of food. I'm wondering where all this fat is wound up.
It's in Tennessee.
It's in Tennessee, all of it in big mounds.
I can show you. Just come to the airport. I can show you where it is.
More and more research is, in fact, suggesting that sugar, especially in the quantities that we eat it, is really bad for us, as is refined wheat, which becomes sugar in our bloodstream pretty much the moment it enters our bloodstream, especially when it's not wrapped up in a fiber matrix, as it is in apples and oranges and corn. So you want that fiber matrix to slow the ingestion of these sugars and fat and refined wheats. This, more and more, we seem to know, it correlates with when our diseases started to happen. We started eating breakfast cereals. Used to be non-cereals. They used to be properly made eggs and bacon and meats and whole oats and things like that. We started eating all this manufactured food in the 50s, 60s, 70s. We started pumping more. Our cereals used to be just lightly sugared until about the 1950s when they became half sugar.
Really? Seriously?
Seriously, 50% sugar, some of those cereals were, because we ate it up. We bought it. We made that choice. We started eating these foods at the same time we started getting sick. So it does seem to make sense from a societal standpoint, an observer's standpoint, and it's also being borne out in more and more actual tests, clinical tests. But I think the clinical tests have been playing out in the food deserts for years. They've been eating this manufactured food and only this manufactured food for decades, and they're more sick than people who live near a grocery store and have access to fresh food, and they die younger than we do. So that's a good long-term study.
It bothers me that food can make us sick and it can't make us healthy.
It can make us healthy if we eat nutritious food, and we cook it ourselves.
Okay.
But our food can make us sick, and because it's making us sick, we've started treating our food like medicine, and I think that's dangerous too. It's taken the joy out of food. Food should be joyous. It should be shared. It should be enjoyed. It should be eaten the way we eat it in Europe, in Italy and France. They've got it figured out. They're eating fatty duck confits and bottles of wine and heavy cheeses, and they're much more healthy. They don't have the obesity problems that we have here. They rejoice in food, and I think we need to rejoice in food and not worry about food so much.
So is there anything that you would change about the way you eat?
The quantities in which I eat it. I love food, and I eat far too much of it than my 54-year-old body actually needs. But I eat good food. I cook all my food, or I eat it at good restaurants, but I cook the food, and I don't eat packaged foods. And I do that not because I'm on a health kick. I'm doing that because I like to do it, because my body feels good when I do it, and I am very healthy. I eat all the fat I want, and my doctor says I will never need to give you a cholesterol medicine. I don't know how you do it. Your low cholesterol is super high, and I think that's just because I eat food that I cook myself. That's why you're so healthy.
I think that's genetic, honestly.
Genetics have a huge part in it. Some people have high cholesterol.
Right, and I think some people just cook like saints and they still...
And they can't do it. Much of it is genetics. So that's why I say there's no one diet out there for anybody. Everybody's body is different. Pay attention to your body and how it responds to food. Don't pay attention to how you feel while you're eating something. Pay attention to how you feel after you've eaten it. That's a good model of how to eat and knowing what's good for us.
So I make my own salad dressing. I make my own soups.
Isn't it hard?
I make my
But
own...
it's so hard. You can get that wishbone stuff And you just have to shake it.
I'm telling you. It's not hard like calculus. I mean, it just is very time consuming to do all of this. And I work at home, and I don't have children. And I don't know how people do it. I don't know how families that have 2 jobs and children and mothers who are picking up their kids and coming home, these are not people who are going to be able to make their own cereal, their own granola, their own soup, their own salad dressing. And all of this stuff is available to us. I feel this all the time in my life, and it's why I don't say, and I cook all of this wonderful food. I cook all of this wonderful food because I work upstairs, and I can do it. It's such a luxury of my profession.
I have been criticized as well for demanding that people cook when I work at home and do have the luxury of more time, therefore. I'm not spending commuting. Someone was there to raise the kids. So yeah, if you're a working mother with 4 kids, it's going to be really hard. My suggestion would be one meal a week. Shoot for that. Show your children, teach your children how to cook basic food. Have them help. They're free labor.
Yeah.
Stop coddling them. Use them.
Well, and I know a lot of moms who come in and say on Sunday they cook. They go to the grocery store, they make 3 stews and soups and all of this food. They put it in baggies, they stick it in the freezer, and then they have food for the whole week. And that's a level of organization that I bow to. It's incredible.
It does take time. Cooking takes work. Anything that's really good for you takes work. We have to stop demanding everything to be so convenient.
But everything is so convenient.
It can be convenient.
And that's hard.
Okay, all you people who have bought into the convenience foods, do you have more time because you're doing this? Are you healthier? Are you happier? In most cases, no, we even have less time. Why do we have less time when our food manufacturers have gone to the trouble of making our food so easy?
Facebook.
There you go.
Your telephone.
Television.
Hey, here's a question I want to ask you. There's a grocery store in Nashville that I adore called the Produce Place. The whole thing is maybe the size of this stage.
Wow.
And there's just one of them. And it does really well. Is there a place for the Produce Place? Do you see many of those kinds of grocery stores? And do you think that they'll be able to hang on?
I don't know because it's such a low margin business. I hope that it is because that's the stuff that we should be eating most of. Are their prices higher than they are at your local grocery?
No, they're not. No.
God bless them. I hope they're successful.
And they sell seasonal. And they are like across the street from a battered women's safe house. And so their whole employee stream changes every 3 weeks.
Wow.
Because they hire battered women to work at the grocery. I mean, it is an astonishing grocery store. But I often wonder, how are they existing?
I don't know how long have they been around.
Since the 70s?
That's great. They probably developed great sources. They've probably developed a lot of local farmers who they can count in to bring them local stuff when it's in season. And they found those purveyors throughout the country who can deliver the produce they need in the winter months when it's not growing everywhere.
Yeah. I worry about my little produce place.
Well, keep shopping there.
No, I do.
Spend your money there.
Do
Spend your money at independent bookstores because they're really valuable in curating the books that we need to be reading. And go to those good stores, those good food stores that are selling nutritious food for affordable prices, like that one.
Yeah. Shall we open this up to include our friends in the audience? All right. Because you guys have questions about food.
And you know how to do it. Write your question down and give it to your usher or tweet it to CHQ17 and we will ask your questions.
Nice.
Talking about cooking, what about raw diets?
I like that one. Raw diets now seem to me a tool of the fanatic, the self-righteous, the
hungry.
And very hungry. It's been shown that, I love raw food. Apples, great raw food. Carrots, terrific raw. Don't like them roasted. But those people who insist on all raw diets are going the wrong direction. No society, no group of people has survived exclusively on a raw diet. Raw diets, unless you have a lot of money and a lot of time to make sure you get all the nutrition you need that you're not getting from cooked food, if you don't have that, you will get sick. Women will stop menstruating. Your hair will start falling out, as the subject of a recent article described in her move from raw vegan to a more nutritious vegetarian diet. We need cooked food. Cooked food provides so much more nutrients than we can get from raw food. Cooking food is good for our food. So I'm very skeptical of raw diets and recommend that people balance their meals with cooked food and raw food. Foods of many varieties, of many colors. As my doctor says, eat as many colors as you can.
I like this one because it could be from my daughter. It's from Twitter. She says, this person, or my mom owned the I Hate cookbook. I own Moosewood Cooks at home. Doesn't cooking start with a good cookbook?
Oh, that's a nice question.
It starts with learning how to cook the basics somewhere. And if that's a cookbook, then yes, we need good cookbooks. That's why I wrote my Ruhlman's 20, because I thought cooking is not that hard and there's only 20 things you need to know. Here are those 20 things. There's another wonderful cookbook called 12 Recipes about a chef who wanted to teach his college-age kids how to cook. He isolated the 12 recipes that would give them hundreds of dishes. So yes, we need somewhere to, given that our moms don't cook and our dads didn't cook, who is going to teach us to cook since we're not handing it down the way we used to? More and more it's going to be those books. And maybe it's going to be Blue Apron. Who knows?
But now, I feel very strongly about this. When I get irritated when someone says, well, I can't cook, because you are not a chef. But if you can read, you can cook. Cooking is really reading comprehension in a huge way. I mean, I've messed up a lot of recipes because I've been too fast and sloppy and I've missed things. But if you read the way you should and you follow it, you're going to come up with dinner.
Yes, and read the whole recipe in advance. Think it through. Think in your head of how it's supposed to look when it's cooking. And so when it doesn't look that way, you can adjust and evaluate it. Because recipes aren't instruction manuals. Recipes are sheet music. Recipe can be a cello sonata can be played by Yo-Yo Ma or a high school cellist. So look at recipes as interpretations. Use your common sense. Read a recipe through. Get rid of all the obstacles. One of the obstacles in cooking is that people are trying to cook on a little board and they're cutting. They're making the work so hard. They're using dull knives. Perhaps the biggest obstacle to easy cooking is a dull knife. It's very hard to cook with a dull knife on a tiny cutting board. So there's lots of little things you can do to make cooking easier and more fast. It's just common sense. You get a good cutting board. Sharpen your knives. Get rid of the keys and the pen and the notepad that are cluttering up your work area.
I also think a really great way to learn how to cook is through baking.
That teaches you precision. That teaches you to follow a recipe, because you do need to be more attentive to ingredients and amounts of ingredients.
And I think you can bail out on a recipe as long as you know first. It's like the E.E. Cummings principle. You don't have to use punctuation if you know how to use punctuation.
Right.
But you can't abandon it until you understand how to use it.
No, that's correct. Picasso knew how to.
Exactly.
He was a superlative draftsman before he did his weird cubist stuff.
Right.
What's wrong with kale?
It's been foisted on us from so many places that it's in danger of being hated out of existence. There's nothing wrong with kale. My point was kale is nutritious, it's not healthy. And it's very nutritious. And if you can find baby kale and chop it up really finely and put a simple vinegar, just pour some oil and squeeze some lemon juice on it and maybe some diced shallot, you've got a really nutritious salad. Kale is good. We should eat more kale, but not only kale.
Some concerns about waste from the grocery side and also from the home side. What are your tips for buying fresh food and cooking for one?
That's a great question, and waste is a big issue. As far as grocery stores go, they're very good at avoiding waste, which they call shrink. They lose money if they waste food, and margins are so razor thin that they avoid waste wherever possible. Produce, when fruit starts going bad, it gets cut up and sold as cut fruit. If it's not looking if it's good to eat but doesn't look good, people won't buy spotty apples. They'll send it to food service and they'll prepare a Waldorf salad with that apple that might be on its way out. So they're very good at finding ways to avoid waste. What waste they do have, they often have composting. They have services that will turn that waste into organic matter. We waste far more food at home than grocers do, and that's where the real shame is. I would say buy only what you need. If you only need a couple of carrots, your grocery store will just sell you a couple of carrots. Ask them for 1 jalapeno pepper. They've happy packaged it up for you. They will give you whatever you want. You just have to ask them for it.
And freeze. Use your freezer.
Use that great preservation tool that is our freezer. Absolutely, freeze stuff. And mark it, because you will not remember 6 years from now what that thing is in this plastic bag or this deli cup.
We're going to play a game. I'm going to say a buzzword, and you're going to tell us what you think about it. Gluten-free.
Oy.
Oi, that might just have been the whole answer.
I don't know how this came to be such a trend, and it's a trend and it's a fad, I believe. But suddenly, so many people felt that their ills were related to gluten, which is a protein found in wheat. We've been eating it for thousands of years without any ill health, and suddenly, within the past 2 decades, it is the bane of the American diet. There are very few people who have celiac disease, the very serious disease in which you can't even wipe down a plate from a celiac person that has wiped down a plate with bread on it or wheat on it without their getting sick. That's very sick. It's very serious illness, and it's very unfortunate. There are people who are gluten intolerant or gluten sensitive. I think it's a fad. I eat gluten, and I feel fine, and I will continue to do so. Our diets of refined wheats may have made us more gluten intolerant. I don't know. Our bad diet's done a lot of stuff to us. It may be the result of that. If eating pasta or eating fresh bread makes you ill, don't eat it. That's all I have to say on the gluten-free. I'll tell you what a grocer said to me about the gluten-free. I said, is gluten-free really better for us than not? He says, I don't know, but I'm loving the hell out of it.
What kills me is when I see a sign over the fresh carrots that say gluten-free, exclamation point.
Yeah. That is our being stupid. That is an example of our buying into marketing. Our buying fat-free granola bars. Fat's never a problem in granola. It's the sugar that's the problem. But we like that fat-free label. The gluten-free coffee. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Right. Ridiculous.
GMO.
This is a much more complicated subject. I do not think that GMOs are necessarily bad for our bodies, and they're not necessarily bad for our diets, for our communities. What may be bad is the fertilizer required to grow these crops, and that fertilizer may not be bad for our bodies either, but it's bad for our gut flora. That glyphosate that is in Roundup that gets on our vegetables may kill the gut bacteria that keeps us healthy. We have more bacteria within our bodies than we have cells in our bodies. And this bacteria is what keeps us healthy, allows us to digest food, and that's what GMOs may be destroying and may be responsible for our health issues. But again, I would rather buy organic than I would be to avoid GMOs. We've been genetically modifying food forever. GMOs per se are not bad. They may result in bad food, though.
Organic.
What I know, and this is my opinion only, it's better to eat organic because it's less likely to have these pesticides that may or may not be harming our gut flora and our bodies. I would say if you can afford it, buy organic. It's certainly not worse for you, and it may well be better for you.
Yeah, but do you ever look at a carrot that's not organic and think, what is this, an inorganic carrot?
No, I don't. And I usually I buy I'm cheap. I buy the commodity carrots. I eat a lot of them. I eat like 2 pounds a week. I'm not going to buy. Yeah, I should be a spokesman for the Carrot Council. I love carrots.
Oh, tell them about baby carrots, because I love that.
Oh, I hated baby carrots when they first came on the scene.
They're not babies.
They're not baby carrots. They're adult carrots. They came about because a carrot grower, one of the major carrot growers, got frustrated by all the stunted and ill-shaped and ugly carrots that often came with a good crop. So he figured out a way to whittle them down and sell them as baby carrots that are already washed. You can just take them out of the bag and eat them. And so that's how we get our baby carrots. And they're, in fact, the center of a carrot, which is the least nutritious, least flavorful part of the carrot. They became so successful that we're now growing, we breeded carrots that do turn into fairly tasty baby carrots. But again, they're not baby carrots. And you should know, I mean, we should think about this.
Carrots can't even have babies.
Exactly.
Is honey better than sugar?
I love these. These are really good.
These are good. These are
Yeah.
good questions. My understanding is all sugar is sugar. It's pretty much the same stuff. It's not going to be. I don't think honey's any better for you or worse for you than corn syrup is. It may be. Honey may have trace elements that help our allergies.
Yes.
So I do like to buy local honeys. Honey tastes a lot better than corn syrup, so I would always go with that. It's a very flavorful sugar, and so I encourage eating honey, but I don't encourage eating pounds of honey every day. That's going to be just as bad for you. It's sugar. It hits your bloodstream the same way. Same with the agave sugar, all those organic. Same with organic cane sugar, which you'll see on boxes of Whole Foods products. That's not any better than cane sugar or beet sugar.
Did you, because we're the same age, did you chew comb when you were a kid? Or is that just a country thing?
I do not even know what comb is.
Honeycomb.
Oh, honeycomb.
Honeycomb.
It only became available to me.
Did you guys chew honeycomb? Yeah. Go honeycomb.
Yes, only once we had a farmer's market, a bona fide farmer's market, did I have access to honeycomb.
Some concerns about cost, kind of all over the place. One is a concern about what it means for the farmer if stores will have to get better at supply costs.
It's hard for farmers. They need to grow more and more food to be viable. Cost is the main issue. I think the biggest issue is we need to be willing to pay more for our food. We demand our food to be cheaper and cheaper forever, and we have to get used to saying, I'm willing to pay more food for better food that's grown in the right way by farmers who care about the food that we have available to us.
We had a speaker yesterday afternoon who said that our food is cheap because of migrant labor. And it sounds as if that's an issue that you might agree with as well.
That's one way to keep food costs down. Migrant labor is cheap labor, and it's a part of our society that I don't know that we can get rid of. Trump's trying to get rid of it. So I don't know the answer to that. It's a hard question, how we get our food. It's a complex, huge system feeding this country of 300 million people, encompassing all issues. My book, Grocery, is so hard to write because there are so many issues bound up in how we produce, distribute, manufacture, and cook our own food.
Tell us about whole grains and if they're truly nutritious.
Whole grains are better than refined grains because refined, here's another word issue, refined is more elegant, good. Well, refined flour means they've taken all the nutritious stuff out of it. All the nutritious stuff is the stuff that has gone bad. Like the fatty acids, the oils, the nutritious oils that will go rancid if left on the shelves. Whole grains are better for us because they have the fiber matrix still intact. They've got all that stuff in there, which is good for us. So yes, whole grains are better than refined grains. Refined grains, since we took all the nutritious stuff, had to be fortified. Fortified is good. It means strong, right? Well, they've had to put these vitamins back in, but they didn't put everything that we need back in. So again, beware of words like refined and fortified. And especially if your food has to tell you that it's food on the package, you don't want to eat it. It's probably not food.
What about the best buy date and food going bad?
Another confusing part of people are confused about this. They put that on there as grocers put it on there just as a way to keep track of their inventory. Don't pay attention to those. If best used by, pay attention to the quality. If it tastes good, it's fine. You know, if your egg doesn't smell rotten, it's probably pretty good to eat. You can float an egg. If your egg floats, it's probably too old because too much water has left it, and air has replaced that pocket of water. For the most part, use your common sense. If your meat is slimy and stinks, don't eat it.
Okay, but what if it's a can of soup and you look at it and it's a year off date? Do you eat that soup?
If it's been properly canned, yeah. If it doesn't have holes from botulism gases being released, I wouldn't eat it. It's probably fine. It's just not going to be as good. It's not going to hurt you. You know, you're going to know it if your food's going to hurt you. 9 times out of 10. Not the bacteria in the lettuce at the salad bar. That you don't know.
You know, it's interesting. My husband says about medicine, about your Excedrin or your Sudafed or whatever, and people are always throwing those away if they're off date. He said it goes bad by like 1%. The effectiveness of the aspirin that is 5 years out of date is only 1% less effective, and don't ever throw that stuff away.
Yeah, it's dry. It's pretty well preserved.
Right.
What about home canning?
If you want to put in that effort, that's great. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's what we used to do as a matter of course. It's how we fed ourselves throughout a cold winter. We put food up. Now that we have refrigeration and freezing, we've kind of lost that. I love the idea of canning because it shows an appreciation for food. It shows people are growing their own food, and it's delicious, nutritious food. So I'm all for it. But it does take work. It is an effort. It is a chore.
What about the role that poverty plays in access to food?
Poverty makes food difficult. It makes getting food harder. And that's something that more and more people are becoming aware of, and we have many groups working to feed the hungry. Many chefs will only put their charitable muscle, and they have considerable charitable muscle these days, toward groups that fight poverty, that feed hungry. It's going to be an issue that's a bigger global issue as we're approaching 2050 and our populations get to be 10 billion, 12 billion on this population. Feeding a planet is going to be harder and harder, but it's not going to be harder here for the most part. It's going to be harder in places like India and Africa. So poverty is not the issue. It is in America as it is in third world countries like India and Africa.
This is an interesting concept that I'm not familiar with, grain brain.
Grain brain. I don't know what that is. You do.
I know
from
what
magazine.
grain brain is, yeah.
Tell me.
It's people who feel that when you eat too much wheat, it makes you sloggy and sort of brain dead.
Well, that would make sense from an insulin standpoint, because when you're eating too much refined grains that go in your system without a fiber matrix to slow it down, you get this rush. It's just like having a sugar rush. It's like eating a lot of sugar. It does the same thing.
And then you want to go to bed.
Yeah, it floods you. Yeah, you get a burst of energy, and then not only do you want to go to bed, you're still hungry. You're hungry again. So again, more and more research says lay off on the refined grains, the refined wheat products, eat more whole grains, eat more whole vegetables, and food you cook yourself.
A lot of confusion about nutritional labeling requirements some of the concepts that we threw out, you were saying, well, that's just something that they're trying to fool us about. Do we want nutritional labeling?
Everybody needs to recognize that nutritional labeling is there to warn you about what's bad in that food. It's not there to tell you what's good in that food. We know what's good in that food. It's there to tell you how much refined wheat's in it, how much sugar is in it. Those are warning labels, not nutrition labels.
Wow.
If you have to pay attention to those warning labels, you probably don't want to eat that food. If you don't know the ingredients in your food, if you can't buy the ingredients that's on the package or can that you're buying, if you can't buy those ingredients at the store where you're shopping, you shouldn't buy that food.
How do you feel about calorie labeling and in restaurants now?
I think we're fat. I'm fat. We need to pay attention to calories because we eat too many calories.
I think it's so amazing. California Pizza Kitchen now puts the calories on their menu. And the thing that I had been ordering was like the most caloric thing on the menu, but I had no idea. So I was just, it's not like I'm going to stop ordering it, but I was really interested. I didn't know.
I think it's a good service.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, that has 2,300 calories in it?
Exactly.
You know, this blueberry muffin at Starbucks?
Yes.
You know, I'm going to get the pain au chocolat, which has 800 calories.
And is tastier.
And is better for you and tastier. Yeah, eat chocolate for breakfast. That's a good breakfast
There you
food.
go.
Should calorie labeling be required?
That's a good question.
Ann just said it was a nice service.
Well, you know what it is? It has to do with how many locations the restaurant is at. So if you have a restaurant that has 5 locations, you don't have to do the calorie labeling. It's very, very expensive to figure out how many calories are in the pain au chocolat. But if you're Starbucks, then you do have to calorie label. That's my understanding of the way that works.
And the reason that is because these people have centralized production facilities, and when you're mass producing food, you're taking out all the good stuff and filling it in with sugar and refined wheat, basically. And so that's why they need to do it. They're loading up the calories.
You're getting called out. The restaurant is getting called out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have another project that's going to allow an amateur chef the ability to use legacy food prep like charcuterie?
To use legacy food products?
This person asked.
I wrote a book called Charcuterie and also a book about salumi, about preserving foods, because I realized that we didn't preserve food to have this delicious salami or this fabulous duck confit that's so wonderful to order at restaurants. We have this great food, this charcuterie, this salumi, because it kept us alive. And I thought how ingenious we are as a species to not only preserve the food to keep ourselves alive, but do it in a way that is so delicious that we want to keep doing it, even though we have a refrigerator and a freezer. We don't need to go to the work of preserving food this way. We do it because it's delicious. I do not have such a book coming out because I've said all that I do. I'm working a book on pâtés and terrines.
You've written so many books you can't even remember the ones you're writing.
I'm working on.
That's good.
So I have a book on pâtés, terrines, and confits that are coming out soon.
This person agrees with you, Michael, that cooking is easy, but this person says, I know how to cook. How do you make it easy for Ann?
Hey, listen, Ann knows how to cook.
My next book should be Teaching Ann Patchett to Cook. And it may well have that idea behind it. You may be the inspiration for a new book. Come to
my house. You and Ann come and visit us for a few days, and I'll cook for you.
Okay, we shall do that. I'll show you all the ways to make your cooking easier and faster. It's true. I do know how to cook. I learned how to cook professionally. I can cut and dice and do all this stuff fast.
Me too. I used to cook in a restaurant.
That's right, you did.
I am no fool.
So what are you complaining about? She's a whiner. She's bought into convenience.
Let's take this off the stage, Michael.
So we'll do that now. Ann Patchett
wait,
and Michael.
Can I say one thing before we do this?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Willard, if you're in the audience, will you come here? Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Ann Patchett, Michael Ruhlman.
Thank you. Been a great audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.